Chapter 1. The Ceremony of Shame. The pack house reeked of cedar smoke and ancient judgment. Sarah stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, her human scent marking her as the outsider she'd always been. Around her, wolves in human form whispered behind cupped hands, their eyes glowing amber in the firelight. She'd lived among the Silver Moon Pack for 3 years, ever since the car accident that killed her parents on the mountain road and left her stranded in their territory. But she'd never felt more alien than she did now. The human must choose. Alpha Garrick's voice boomed through the timber hall, his massive frame casting shadows across the worn floorboards. His silver hair gleamed like a threat. Pack law is absolute. You've come of age under our protection, Sarah Morven. You will select a mate from among our unmated males, or you will leave our lands before the next full moon. Sarah's hands trembled. She clenched them into fists, nails biting into her palms. This was the price of sanctuary, the debt she'd always known would come due. The Silver Moon Pack had saved her life, sheltered her, but they'd never let her forget she was human. Fragile. Temporary. A liability. "I don't understand," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. "Why now? I've been here for years. I've worked. I've contributed." "You've been a child." Garrick's eyes narrowed. "But you turned 23 last week. Our laws require all females of breeding age to bond with a pack member or leave. You are no exception, despite your limitations." The word hung in the air like rotting meat. Sarah's gaze swept the assembled males. Dominant wolves, most of them, their postures radiating barely contained aggression. She recognized them all. Thorn, the beta's son, who'd made it clear he found humans beneath him. Cassian, whose smile never reached his cold eyes. Riker, who'd once cornered her in the supply shed and told her exactly what he'd do if she ever became available. Her stomach turned. "And if I refuse to choose anyone?" she asked. Alpha Garrick's expression hardened. "Then you walk into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on your back. No provisions. No protection. There are rogues in these mountains, girl. Feral wolves who've lost their humanity. You wouldn't survive 3 days." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. This was entertainment for them, watching the humans squirm, forcing her to accept her place at the bottom of their hierarchy. "However," Garrick continued, his lips curving into something cruel, "there is one other option." He gestured toward the shadows at the back of the hall. A figure emerged, and the whispers intensified into sharp gasps. The man who stepped into the firelight moved like darkness itself, fluid, predatory, utterly silent. He was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a worn black coat that had seen better days. Dark hair fell past his collar, unkempt and wild. But it was his eyes that stopped Sarah's. Breath, pale silver, almost colorless, burning with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. And something else, something that felt like recognition, though she'd never seen him before in her life. "This," Alpha Garrick announced with barely concealed disgust, "is Cale Ashwood. Once a warrior of the Northern Packs. Now, nothing. A wolf without a pack. A rogue who crawled back to our territory seeking mercy." Cale's expression remained impassive, but Sarah caught the slight tension in his jaw. The way his hands hung loose at his sides, ready for violence. "He's offered himself as a candidate for your choosing," Garrick continued, "though I cannot imagine why any female would accept such a fallen creature." "Why is he disgraced?" Sarah found herself asking, unable to look away from those silver eyes. The Alpha's smile was vicious. "Ask him yourself, if you're foolish enough to consider him." The other males shifted, a few actually growling low in their throats. The hostility toward this Cale was palpable, a living thing that pressed against Sarah's chest. "Make your choice, human," Garrick commanded. "One of our ranked wolves, who will at least give you status and protection. Or the outcast, who has nothing to offer but shame." Sarah's mind raced. Every option was a trap. The ranked wolves saw her as a possession, a curiosity to be claimed and controlled. But this stranger? She studied him carefully. Unlike the others, he didn't look at her with hunger or contempt. His gaze was guarded, yes, but beneath it she sensed something else. Wariness. Pain. The kind of deep, bone-weary exhaustion that came from carrying unbearable weight. She knew that look. She saw it in her own mirror every morning. "What happened to you?" she asked him directly, ignoring the collective intake of breath around her. "Why won't they tell me?" Kale's eyes locked onto hers, and the world seemed to contract to just the two of them. When he spoke, his voice was rough, like gravel wrapped in smoke. Because the truth would require them to admit their own guilt. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Alpha Garrick snarled, stepping forward. "You dare?" "I'll choose him." The words left Sarah's mouth before her brain caught up. "I choose Cale Ashwood." Silence crashed through the hall like a physical force. "What?" Garrick's face purpled with rage. "You stupid girl, you don't know what you're— You said I had to choose a mate or leave." Sarah forced steel into her spine, lifting her chin. "I'm choosing. That's within pack law, isn't it?" The alpha's teeth elongated slightly, his wolf pressing against his control. "You'll regret this." "Maybe." Sarah glanced at Cale, who watched her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "But it's my choice to regret." For a long moment, she thought Garrick might attack her right there. The violence rolled off him in waves. But pack law was sacred. Even he couldn't violate it directly. "So be it," he finally growled. "You've chosen disgrace. The bonding ritual will be held in 3 days. Until then, Cale Ashwood is permitted to remain on pack lands, but only in the exile quarters. And you, girl." His smile returned, cold and knowing. "You'll have 3 days to discover exactly what kind of monster you've shackled yourself to." He swept from the hall, taking most of the pack with him, leaving Sarah alone with her decision. And the stranger whose silver eyes promised secrets that might destroy them both. Chapter 2. The Outcast's Warning. The exile quarters sat at the edge of pack territory, where the forest grew dense and the mountain wind cut like broken glass. Sarah followed Cale in silence, her heart hammering against her ribs. The other wolves had dispersed quickly after her declaration, throwing looks of pity and disgust over their shoulders. She'd felt their judgment like physical blows, but she'd kept her spine straight, her chin high. Now, alone with this stranger she'd just agreed to bind herself to. Doubt crept in like cold water. Cale moved ahead of her on the narrow path, his gait predatory and precise. He hadn't spoken since they left the pack house. Hadn't even looked back to see if she was following. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unasked questions. The cabin that emerged from the darkness was barely more than a shack, weathered wood, a sagging porch, shutters hanging crooked on their hinges. Nothing like the main pack housing with its warm lights and communal fires. This was where they sent wolves to be forgotten. Cale stopped at the base of the porch steps and finally turned to face her. In the moonlight, his features were sharp planes and dangerous shadows. Handsome, she realized with a jolt, in a way that had nothing to do with symmetry, and everything to do with the raw power barely contained beneath his skin. "You should go back," he said quietly. "Tell the Alpha you've changed your mind." Sarah blinked. "What?" "You made a mistake," His silver eyes caught the moonlight, reflecting it back like mirrors. I'm giving you a chance to correct it before the bonding makes it permanent. You don't want... She struggled to find the words. You offered yourself. Why would you do that if you didn't want to be chosen? A muscle ticked in his jaw. I had my reasons, but they don't involve trapping some naive human girl who doesn't understand what she's agreed to. The dismissal in his tone sparked anger in her chest. Don't call me naive. I knew exactly what I was doing. Did you? He descended one step, bringing himself closer, and she caught his scent. Pine and smoke and something wild that made her pulse quicken. Do you know what they'll do to you, bonded to me? You'll be pariah, lower than Omega. They'll use you to punish me, hurt you just to watch me suffer. And what would they do to me bonded to Riker? Sarah shot back. Or Thorn? I've seen how they look at me, Kale, like I'm prey. At least you... She faltered, then pushed forward. At least you look at me like I'm a person. Something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or pain. You don't know anything about me. Then tell me. She climbed the first step, refusing to back down. What did you do that was so terrible? Why does the Alpha hate you? Kyle was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. The wind sighed through the pines, carrying the distant howl of patrol wolves. I killed his son, he finally said. The words hung between them like drawn blades. Sarah's breath caught. You... What? 3 years ago, I challenged Marcus Silvermoon and tore his throat out in fair combat. Kale's voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands had curled into fists. Pack law says a dominance challenge is sacred, but Garrick has never forgiven me for it. Never will. Horror and confusion warred in Sarah's chest. Why? Why would you challenge him? Because he needed to die. The rawness in those words made her flinch. And because I was stupid enough to think justice mattered more than politics. He turned away, climbing the remaining steps to his door. Go back to the pack house, Sarah. Find another way. I'm not your salvation. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. Because something in his words resonated with a truth she recognized. The hollow ache of being punished for doing what was right. What did Marcus do? She asked softly. Kale's hand froze on the door handle. His shoulders tensed, the muscles visible even beneath his coat. Something unforgivable, he whispered. The anguish in his voice cracked something open inside her. She'd heard that tone before, in her own voice, in the dark hours after her parents died when she'd screamed at the unfairness of a world that took good people and left her broken. 3 years ago, she said slowly, was when I came here. When my parents died on the mountain road. Kyle went absolutely still. The Alpha told me it was an accident, Sarah continued, her voice shaking, now. But there were always things that didn't make sense. The way the car was damaged. Not like we'd hit something, but like something had hit us. The claw marks they said were from the rescue. The way certain wolves wouldn't meet my eyes. She watched the tension radiate through Kale's frame, saw the way his breathing had changed. Tell me, she whispered. Please. What really happened to my parents? For an endless moment, he stood frozen. Then his hand fell away from the door, and he turned to face her. The moonlight illuminated his expression, and what she saw there made her heart clench. Grief, rage, guilt. Marcus was drunk on power and territory, Kyle said, each word seeming to cost him. He'd been pushing boundaries for months, attacking anything that came through our lands. Your parents' car broke down at the worst possible time. They were... He swallowed hard. They were trying to help someone. Another wolf, injured on the road. Marcus saw them as witnesses. as liabilities. The world tilted beneath Sarah's feet. He killed them, she breathed. The Alpha's son killed my parents. I got there too late to save them. Kyle's voice cracked. But not too late to make him pay. I challenged him that night, still covered in your mother's blood from trying to help her. And I made sure everyone watched when I ended him. Tears burned Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back. That's why they hate you. Not because you killed him, because you exposed what he was. The Alpha would rather protect his son's memory than admit the truth. Kale's laugh was bitter. So he declared me rogue, stripped my rank, and would have exiled me completely if not for the old laws. He keeps me here as punishment, a reminder of his pain. And mine, Sarah whispered. He kept me here knowing what really happened, knowing his own son. The rage that flooded through her was hot and clarifying. All this time she'd been grateful, had felt indebted to these wolves for their mercy. They'd murdered her parents and called it mercy. Now you understand, Kyle said quietly. Why you should run. Why binding yourself to me will only bring you more pain. But Sarah climbed the last steps until she stood directly in front of him. Close enough to see the gold flecks in his silver eyes. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. I understand that you avenged my parents, she said. That you sacrificed everything for justice when no one else would. And I understand that Alpha Garrick has been lying to me for 3 years. She held his gaze, letting him see her resolve. So no, I'm not running. In 3 days, I'm going to bond with you. And then we're going to make them all regret ever thinking we were powerless. Something dangerous kindled in Kale's eyes. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of something that looked like respect. You're going to get hurt, he warned. I've been hurt before. Sarah managed a grim smile. At least this time, I'll be fighting. Back. Chapter 3. Secrets in the Darkness. Sarah didn't return to the pack house that night. She couldn't face the wolves who'd smiled at her for 3 years while hiding the truth about her parents' murder. Couldn't stomach the thought of Alpha Garrick's knowing eyes, watching her grieve a loss he'd orchestrated. Instead, she sat on Kyle's sagging porch, wrapped in a blanket he'd silently handed her, and watched the forest breathe in the darkness. Kale had disappeared inside after their confrontation, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She should probably feel afraid, isolated with a self-proclaimed killer, miles from the pack center. But the fear that should have gripped her never came. Maybe because she'd seen the truth in his eyes when he'd spoken about her parents. The guilt that still haunted him. You didn't mourn strangers like that. Not unless you carried their deaths like stones in your chest. The cabin door creaked open behind her. You're still here, Kyle said, his voice rough with something that might have been surprise. Did you really think I'd leave? He moved to lean against the porch railing, keeping careful distance between them. In his hands were 2 chipped mugs, steam rising from them. He offered her one. Tea, he said simply. The pack may treat me like dirt, but they still provide rations. Sarah accepted the mug, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. The gesture was so unexpectedly domestic that it made her throat tight. Thank you. They drank in silence for a while, the night sounds filling the space between them. Somewhere distant, an owl called. The wind carried the scent of pine and approaching rain. You said you got there too late, Sarah finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. To save them. Did you see my parents before they died? Kale's jaw tightened. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he exhaled slowly, a sound of surrender. Your mother was still conscious when I arrived, he said, quietly. Marcus and his friends had already fled. Cowards, I shifted to human form, tried to stop the bleeding, but his hands clenched around his mug. She knew she was dying. She kept asking about you, kept saying she had to get home to her daughter. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks before she could stop them. What did you tell her? I lied. His voice cracked. I told her you were safe, that help was coming, that she'd see you again. He turned away, staring into the darkness. I held her hand until she stopped breathing. It was all I could do. Sarah's chest heaved with silent sobs. For 3 years, she'd wondered if her mother had suffered, if she'd been afraid, if she'd thought about her daughter in those final moments. Now she knew. And somehow, knowing that Cale had been there, that her mother hadn't died alone, eased something in the ragged wound she'd carried. Thank you, she whispered, for being with her, for not letting her be alone. Kyle's head snapped around, his silver eyes wide with shock. You're thanking me? Sarah, if I'd been faster, if I'd tracked Marcus sooner. You would have what? Stopped him before he found them? She wiped at her tears, meeting his gaze steadily. You can't control what a monster does, Cale. You can only choose how you respond. And you chose justice. You chose to make him answer for what he did. Justice didn't bring them back. No, she agreed. But it mattered. It still matters. Something shifted in the air between them. A softening. A tentative bridge being built across the chasm of grief they both carried. Why did you really offer yourself as a mate candidate? Sarah asked, voicing the question that had been nagging at her since the ceremony. You could have let me choose someone else. Could have stayed out of it entirely. Kyle was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the shadows. Because I knew what they'd do to you, he finally said. Thorn would treat you like a trophy. Riker would break you piece by piece. Cassian. He shook his head. The ranked wolves see you as a way to gain favor with the Alpha, a human to control and display. And you don't? I see someone who shouldn't be here at all. His voice was rough with anger, not at her, she realized, but at the situation. You should have been given a choice 3 years ago. Should have been taken somewhere safe, somewhere you could heal. Instead, they kept you here like a pet, Sarah finished bitterly. I know. I've always known, even when I tried to pretend otherwise. You deserved better. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, made her chest ache. When was the last time anyone had suggested she deserved anything? So did you, she said softly. You did the right thing, and they destroyed you for it. I'm not destroyed. But the way he said it, like he was trying to convince himself, suggested otherwise. Sarah studied him in the moonlight. This warrior who'd been stripped of everything, who lived in exile for the crime of seeking justice. There was something else there, beneath the surface. Something he still wasn't saying. What are you hiding? She asked. There's more to this, isn't there? More than just the challenge. Cale's entire body went rigid. What do you mean? The way the Alpha looks at you. It's not just hatred. It's fear. She leaned forward, her intuition screaming that she was close to something important. What else did you take from him when you killed Marcus? The silence stretched so long she thought he'd refuse to answer. Then he turned to face her fully, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Not just grief, not just guilt. Power. Raw, barely contained power that made the air around him shimmer with heat. Marcus wasn't just the Alpha's son, Cale said slowly, each word weighted with significance. He was the heir, the next Alpha of the Silvermoon Pack. I know that. No, you don't understand. Cale's eyes began to glow, that silver brightening to something almost white. When I killed him in challenge, I didn't just take his life. By pack law, by the ancient codes that govern our kind. He paused, and Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. I took his claim, Kale finished. I became the rightful alpha of this pack. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't process what he was telling her. But Garrick is still alpha. How? Because I refuse the title, Kale interrupted, his voice laced with old bitterness. I told the pack elders I didn't want it, that I'd killed Marcus for justice, not power. So they let Garrick stay in his position, and He laughed darkly. I condemn myself to this half-life, not alpha, not omega, just nothing. But the claim still exists, Sarah said slowly, understanding dawning. In the eyes of pack law, you're still the true alpha, Kyle confirmed, which is why Garrick can never let me leave. Can Tautazantaoni never let me gain any power or influence? Because if I ever change my mind... His eyes met hers, burning with intensity. If I ever decided to take what's mine by right, he'd lose everything. Sarah's mind raced. This changed everything. The bonding, the exile, the constant degradation. It was all a cage designed to keep Kale broken and controllable. And now, she whispered, you're about to bond with the human girl he's kept as a pet for 3 years. The daughter of the people his son murdered. Kale's smile was sharp and dangerous. Now you understand why he's afraid. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall. What happens if we go through with this? Sarah asked. If we bond? I don't know, Kale admitted. But it won't be safe. For either of us. Sarah looked at him. This fallen alpha who'd sacrificed everything for a truth no one wanted to hear, who'd held her dying mother's hand and carried the guilt ever since, and made her choice. Good, she said. I'm tired of safe. Chapter 4. The Bond Between Worlds. The rain came down in sheets by dawn, turning the forest path to mud and the world to shades of gray. Sarah woke on Kyle's couch, stiff and disoriented. He'd insisted she take the bedroom, the only bedroom in the tiny cabin, but she'd refused, and they'd compromised on her taking the ancient sofa while he'd supposedly kept watch from the porch. She found him there now, still standing in the same position as the night before, rain soaking through his shirt. He hadn't moved, hadn't slept. You're going to catch pneumonia, she said, stepping out beside him with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Werewolves don't get sick. His voice was distant, distracted. But you're not fully wolf right now. You're human-shaped and soaking wet. She held out the blanket. Come inside. I can't. The words were strained. The full moon is in 2 days. The bonding ceremony is tomorrow night. And He stopped, his jaw clenching. You should know what you're agreeing to. What bonding with a wolf actually means. Sarah's pulse quickened. Tell me. Kyle finally turned to face her, and she was struck by how exhausted he looked. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and tension carved lines around his mouth. It's not like human marriage. When wolves bond, it's deeper, more permanent. How permanent? Forever. The word fell between them like a stone. Our souls intertwine. We'll feel each other's emotions, sense each other's presence. If one of us is hurt, the other knows. If one of us dies... He swallowed hard. The survivor rarely lasts long. The grief is too much. Rain dripped from his hair, running down his face like tears. Sarah stepped closer, bringing the blanket to cover both of them. Is that what you're afraid of? She asked gently. That bonding with me makes me a target? Yes. His honesty was brutal. Garrick won't be able to hurt me directly without violating pack law. But you're human. Fragile. He could arrange an accident, a rogue attack, and there'd be nothing I could do to prove it was him. So we're careful. Careful won't be enough. His hands came up, gripping her shoulders, the first time he'd voluntarily touched her. His fingers burned through the fabric of her shirt. Sarah, listen to me. Once we bond, I won't be able to stay away from you. The wolf instincts are too strong. I'll be drawn to you constantly, need to protect you, claim you. He broke off, releasing her abruptly and stepping back. I'll become possessive, irrational. Everything you do will affect me. Every male who looks at you will trigger my wolf. I'll be a jealous, overprotective nightmare, and you'll hate me for it. Sarah processed this, her heart racing. And what will I become to you? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What? You've told me what you'll feel. What about me? She moved closer again, refusing to let him retreat. What happens to the human half of a wolf bond? Kale's eyes searched hers, something vulnerable flickering in their depths. You'll feel the connection too. Not as strongly as I will, but it'll be there. A pull, an awareness. You'll know when I'm near, sense my emotions. He hesitated. And during the full moon, when I shift... What? Sarah prompted when he didn't continue. You'll feel my wolf. The wildness, the instincts. It can be overwhelming for humans. Frightening. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I don't want to scare you. The admission was so raw, so honest, that Sarah's chest tightened with emotion. This powerful male, a true alpha, even if he'd rejected the title, was terrified of hurting her. Not physically, but emotionally. Of becoming something she'd fear. Kyle, she said softly, reaching up to touch his face. He flinched but didn't pull away. I've been scared every day for 3 years. Scared of saying the wrong thing, of catching the wrong wolf's attention, of being thrown out into a world I'm not prepared for. Her thumb brushed across his cheekbone, feeling the tension there. You're the first person who's made me feel less afraid. That's insane, he breathed, but his eyes had darkened, fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin flush. I'm dangerous. I've killed. I could lose control. You won't. She said it with certainty she couldn't explain. You've had 3 years to lose control, to give in to the rage of what they did to you. But you haven't. You've endured. Enduring isn't the same as being safe. Maybe I don't want safe. Sarah's hand slid down to rest against his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palm. Maybe I want real. And this, whatever this is between us, it feels more real than anything I've experienced since my parents died. Kale's hand came up to cover hers, pressing it more firmly against his heart. You feel it too, then. The pull. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. Since the moment I saw you in that hall, it's like I've been walking through fog, and you're the first solid thing I've found. That's the mate bond. His voice was rough, strained. It's already starting, even before the ceremony. Once you're of age and you choose a wolf, the connection begins to form. The ritual just completes it, seals it. Can it be broken? She wasn't sure why she asked, wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. No. Kale's eyes burned into hers. Once sealed, it's permanent. Death is the only thing that breaks a mate bond. The finality of it should have terrified her. Instead, Sarah felt a strange sense of rightness settle in her bones. As if this was always meant to happen. As if every terrible thing that had led her here had been pointing toward this moment. Then we do it, she said firmly. Tomorrow night, we bond. And then we figure out what comes after. There are things I still haven't told you. Kale's confession came out pained. Things about what I am, what I can do. The alpha claim isn't the only secret I carry. Sarah's curiosity sparked, but she also saw the fear in his eyes, fear of her rejection. Will these secrets change the fact that you avenged my parents? That you've shown me more kindness in 2 days than the pack has in 3 years? No, but then tell me when you're ready. She squeezed his hand. We have time. Do we? Kyle glanced toward the forest, where shadows moved between the trees. Patrol wolves, watching, always watching. They're not going to make this easy. I know. Sarah followed his gaze, seeing the glint of eyes in the darkness. But we don't have to make it easy for them either. A smile ghosted across Kale's lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who'd run screaming when she learned the truth. He turned back to her, and the heat in his gaze made her breath catch. Someone who'd see me as a monster. I've lived with monsters for 3 years, Sarah said quietly. Ones who smile and pretend to be civilized. You're not that. You're just wounded. We're both wounded. Kale's thumb traced across her knuckles, the touch sending sparks up her arm. Maybe that's why this feels right. 2 broken pieces finding each other. Or maybe, Sarah countered, her voice barely audible over the rain. We're not broken at all. Maybe we're just waiting for someone who sees us as whole. The air between them crackled with tension, not dangerous, but charged with possibility, with promise. Kyle leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. Tomorrow night, everything changes. There's no going back. Good, Sarah whispered. I don't want to go back, only forward. Forward, he echoed, and in his voice she heard hope. Fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real from the ruins of their pasts. In the forest, the patrol wolves watched and waited. Tomorrow night, the true alpha would take a mate, and the Silver Moon Pack would never be the same. Chapter 5. The Alpha's Test. The summons came at midday. Sarah was helping Kale patch a leak in the cabin roof, a domestic task that felt strangely intimate, their hands working in tandem, when a young Omega appeared on the path. The girl couldn't have been more than 16, her eyes downcast, her posture submissive. The Alpha requires your presence, she said, directing her words to the ground rather than meeting their eyes. Both of you, immediately. Kale's jaw tightened. For what purpose? The pre-bonding trial. The girl's voice trembled. It's pack law. When an unmated male claims a female, the alpha has the right to test the bond's validity. Sarah's stomach dropped. What kind of test? But the Omega was already retreating, practically running back down the path toward the pack house. Kyle watched her go, his expression dark. This is a trap, he said, flatly. Garrick's trying to find a way to stop the bonding without technically violating pack law. Can he do that? The pre-bonding trial is ancient tradition, usually just a formality. The alpha asks a few questions, confirms both parties are willing, and it's done. Kale climbed down from the roof, landing silently beside her. But Garrick won't make this simple. He'll twist the rules, try to prove we're not a true match. How can he prove that? Sarah demanded, anger sparking in her chest. I chose you. That's supposed to be enough. For a normal bonding, yes. Kyle's eyes met hers, and she saw the worry there beneath his careful control. But I'm not normal, and he knows it. They walked to the pack house in tense silence, Kale keeping a careful distance between them. Sarah noticed how other wolves scattered at their approach, some from fear, others from disgust. None would meet Kale's eyes directly. She'd never realized how completely they'd isolated him, how thoroughly they'd broken him down from warrior to outcast. The rage that had been simmering in her chest since learning the truth about her parents flared hotter. The great hall was packed when they arrived. Every wolf in the territory seemed to have gathered, forming a circle around the ceremonial space. Alpha Garrick stood at the center, his expression smug. "Ah, our happy couple." His voice dripped with mockery. "Come, let us see if your bond is worthy of pack recognition." Kale moved forward with measured steps, and Sarah followed. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, judging, calculating, waiting for her to fail. "Kale Ashwood," Garrick began, his tone formal. "You have offered yourself as mate to this human female. State your reasons." "She chose me." Kale's voice was steady, but Sarah caught the tension in his shoulders. "I accepted her choice. That's all that matters." "Is it?" Garrick's smile widened. "You expect us to believe that you, a wolf who refused the alpha title, who has shown nothing but contempt for pack politics, suddenly desires to bond? To tie yourself permanently to a weak human?" Sarah bristled at the word weak, but Kale's hand shot out, gripping her wrist in warning. "Don't react. Don't give him ammunition." "I expect you to follow pack law," Kale said coldly, "which states that any unmated wolf may claim a mate with the alpha's acknowledgement. I'm here for that acknowledgement. And you shall have it, if you pass the trial." Garrick turned to Sarah, his eyes calculating. "Tell me, human, what do you know of this wolf? His past? His nature?" "I know he avenged my parents when no one else would," Sarah said clearly, letting her voice carry through the hall. Several wolves shifted uncomfortably. "I know he's shown me more honor than this pack has in 3 years." Garrick's expression darkened. "Careful, girl. You speak of things you don't understand." "Don't I?" Sarah stepped forward, ignoring Kyle's warning grip. "I understand that your son murdered innocent humans. I understand that Kale challenged him for it and won fairly. And I understand that you've punished him for exposing a truth you wanted buried." The hall erupted in whispers. Garrick's face flushed with rage. "You overstep," he snarled. "The trial is not about ancient history. It's about whether this bond is genuine, whether you can truly accept what he is." "I know what he is." Sarah held her ground. "He's a wolf. An alpha by right, even if he rejected the title." "Is he?" Garrick's smile returned, sharp and cruel. "Are you certain, human? Have you asked him about the night he killed my son? About what really happened in that challenge?" Sarah's confidence wavered. She glanced at Kale, seeing his expression had gone carefully blank. Too blank. "What is he talking about?" she asked quietly. Kale's jaw clenched. "Sarah." "Tell her," Garrick commanded. "Or I will. Tell her what you became that night. What you've been hiding from everyone, including yourself." The hall fell silent. Every eye was on Kale now, and Sarah saw something she'd never seen before. Other wolves backing away from him. Not in disgust, but in fear. Real, primal fear. "Kale?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "What's he talking about?" For a long moment, Kyle said nothing. Then his shoulders sagged, as if under an unbearable weight. "When I challenged Marcus," he said slowly, "something happened. Something that's never happened before in pack history." His eyes lifted to meet hers, and they were glowing. Not the amber of a normal wolf, but that strange silver white that seemed to burn from within. "I didn't just shift into my wolf form. I became something else." "Something other?" Garrick interjected, his voice carrying a mix of fear and fascination. "Something ancient. Something that should not exist." "What are you saying?" Sarah demanded, her heart racing. Kale's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The legends speak of the first wolves. The originals. They weren't like us. They were more powerful, more primal. Pure expressions of the wild itself. He swallowed hard. I thought they were just stories. But that night, when I faced Marcus, when my rage and grief became too much to contain. You transformed, Garrick finished, not into a common wolf, but into a primordial. A creature of pure instinct and devastating power. Sarah's mind reeled. A primordial? It means he's not just an alpha. Another voice spoke up. Elder Thorn, the pack's oldest wolf, stepped forward from the crowd. He's something far more dangerous. The primordials were the first shifters, born directly from the moon's magic. They had abilities that modern wolves can't match. Strength, speed, healing, and something else. What else? Sarah whispered, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Thorn's ancient eyes fixed on Kale. The primordials could command other wolves. Not through dominance or politics, but through sheer force of will. One word from a primordial, and every wolf within range would have no choice but to obey. The implications crashed through Sarah like a tidal wave. Kyle wasn't just the rightful alpha of this pack. If he truly was a primordial, he could control them all. Could force them to do anything he wanted. The power he'd been hiding wasn't just political. It was absolute. That's why you refused the alpha title, she said, understanding dawning. Not because you didn't want power, because you were afraid of what you'd become. Kale's expression was raw with pain. I didn't ask for this. I don't want it. The primordial inside me, it's hungry, violent. Everything I try not to be. His voice dropped to a whisper. It's a monster, Sarah, and when we bond, you'll be tied to it forever. The hall held its collective breath, waiting for her reaction. Waiting for her to run, to reject him, to prove that even she had limits. Garrick's smile was victorious. So now you know the truth, human. Still want to bind yourself to that? Sarah looked at Kale, really looked at him, saw the fear in his eyes, the certainty that she would turn away, saw the resignation, as if he'd always known this moment would come. She thought about the past 3 years, about the wolves who'd smiled while hiding the truth of her parents' murder, about the males who'd looked at her like property, about the alpha who'd kept her as a prisoner disguised as a guest. Then she thought about Kale, about how he'd held her mother's hand, how he'd sought justice when no one else would, how he'd endured exile rather than become a tyrant, how he'd chosen to be alone rather than risk hurting someone with the power he carried. Yes, she said firmly, turning to face Garrick. I still choose him. Monster, primordial, alpha, I don't care. He's the only one in this entire pack who's treated me like a person instead of a problem. Garrick's smile faltered. The trial is past, Elder Thorn announced, his voice carrying ancient authority. She knows what he is and chooses him anyway. Pack law is clear. The bonding will proceed. This is madness, Garrick hissed. This is tradition, Thorn corrected. And you would do well to remember, Alpha, that challenging tradition is what brought us here in the first place. The rebuke was subtle but clear. Garrick's face purpled with rage, but he couldn't argue without undermining his own authority. Fine, he spat. Tomorrow night, then. We'll see how long the human survives being bonded to a primordial. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah felt Kale's hand slip into hers, tentative, uncertain. You should have run, he murmured. Probably, she agreed. But I've never been good at doing what I should. And despite everything, she felt him smile. Chapter 6. The night before. The cabin felt smaller that evening, the air thick with unspoken words. Cale had barely spoken since they'd left the pack house. He'd walked ahead of her on the trail, his shoulders rigid, his movements mechanical. Now he stood at the window, staring out at the darkening forest as if searching for something he'd lost. Sarah watched him from the doorway, her heart aching at the isolation radiating from him. "Talk to me," she said softly. "What do you want me to say?" His voice was hollow. "That I'm sorry for hiding what I am? That I should have told you before you made your choice? You tried to warn me away." Sarah moved into the room, settling onto the worn couch. "Multiple times. I didn't listen. Because you didn't know." He turned and the anguish in his eyes stole her breath. "A primordial, Sarah. Do you understand what that means? When the moon is full tomorrow night, when the bonding completes, you'll feel everything I am. The wildness, the hunger, the violence that lives just beneath my skin. You think I'll be afraid of you. You should be." He crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees in front of her. The gesture was so unexpected, so vulnerable that tears pricked her eyes. "I've spent 3 years learning to control it, to cage the primordial inside me. But when I'm near you..." His hands hovered just above her knees, not quite touching. "It's harder. You make me feel things I've been trying to suppress. Want things I have no right to want." Sarah's breath caught. "What do you want?" "Everything." The word was a confession and a curse. "I want to keep you safe. I want to hunt anyone who's ever hurt you. I want to mark you as mine so thoroughly that every wolf for 100 miles knows you're protected." His hands finally settled on her legs, the touch burning through her jeans. "And I want to touch you. Taste you. Learn every sound you make when..." He broke off, his breathing ragged. "See? I'm already losing control, and we're not even bonded yet." Instead of fear, heat pooled in Sarah's stomach. The raw desire in his voice, the way he looked at her like she was both salvation and damnation, it should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel powerful, wanted. "What if I want that too?" she whispered. Cale's eyes flashed silver. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I'm not." She leaned forward, bringing her face closer to his. "You think you're the only one feeling this pull? Cale, I can barely think straight when you're near. Every time you touch me, it's like lightning under my skin. I've never felt this way about anyone. That's the mate bond starting." But his voice was uncertain. "It's not real. It's just instinct." "Is it instinct that makes me trust you when I should be cautious? Is it instinct that makes me want to know everything about you? Your favorite color? What makes you laugh? What haunts you in the dark?" She cupped his face in her hands, feeling the slight stubble beneath her palms. "I didn't choose you because of some mystical bond. I chose you because when I look at you, I see someone who understands what it means to survive something that should have destroyed you." Cale's control cracked. His hands slid up to grip her waist, pulling her to the edge of the couch. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Then show me." It was a challenge, brave and reckless. Show me what it means to be wanted by a primordial. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Cale surged forward, capturing her mouth in a kiss that burned away every thought. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was claiming, demanding, a promise of everything he'd been holding back. Sarah gasped against his lips, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until she was drowning in the taste of him. Pine and smoke and something wild that made her blood sing. His hands roamed her back, her sides, mapping her body with a reverence that contradicted the fierce hunger of his mouth. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathing hard. We should stop, he said, but he didn't release her. Tomorrow night, after the bonding, I won't be able to control myself. But tonight we have a choice, Sarah finished. And I choose this. I choose you. Something broke in Cale's expression, the last of his resistance shattering. I don't deserve you. Good thing I'm not asking for deserving. She kissed him again, softer this time. I'm just asking for real. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other as darkness fell completely outside. Cale eventually pulled her down to sit beside him on the floor, her back against his chest, his arms encircling her like a shield. Tell me something about yourself, Sarah said, her fingers tracing patterns on his forearms. Something no one else knows. Kyle was quiet for a moment. I'm afraid of storms, he finally admitted. Thunder, specifically. It sounds stupid. A primordial afraid of weather. But when I was young, before I knew what I was, I got caught in a lightning strike. It should have killed me, but the primordial awakened instead. The first time I shifted, it was because I was terrified. Sarah twisted to look at him. How old were you? 7. His smile was sad. My parents didn't know what to do with me. Normal wolf pups don't shift until puberty, and they definitely don't turn into ancient legends. They were scared. Of me. Oh, Kyle. She laced her fingers through his. That's why you're so afraid of being a monster. You've been treated like one your whole life. Not my whole life. His arms tightened around her. My younger sister, Lyra, she never feared me. She used to say I was her guardian, not her monster. His voice cracked. She died 5 years ago. Rogue attack. Sarah's heart clenched. I'm so sorry. I wasn't there to protect her. I'd left our pack to travel, to try to understand what I was. And while I was gone, rogues came through. She was 16. He buried his face against her hair. After that, I couldn't go home. Couldn't face my parents knowing I'd failed her. So I wandered until I ended up here. Is that why you challenged Marcus? Sarah asked, gently. Because he reminded you of the rogues? Partly. Cale's breath was warm against her neck. But mostly because your mother looked at me the same way Lyra used to, with hope instead of fear. And I couldn't let him take that from the world again. They sat in silence, the weight of shared grief settling over them like a blanket. Sarah understood now why Cale had held her mother's hand, why he'd lied about help coming. He'd been trying to give a dying woman the same comfort he wished someone had given his sister. Your turn, Cale said quietly. Tell me something no one knows. Sarah took a shaky breath. I'm terrified I'm going crazy. Sometimes, especially at night, I feel like someone's watching me, whispering to me. The pack's healers say it's trauma from the accident, but... She hesitated. What if it's something else? Kyle went very still. What kind of whispers? I don't know. I can't quite make out the words. It's like they're in another language, or coming from very far away. She laughed nervously. See? Crazy. No. Kyle's voice was strange, careful. Sarah, has this been happening since the accident? Or did it start more recently? Since the accident, but it's gotten stronger lately. Why? He was quiet for so long that she started to worry. Finally, he spoke, his words measured. There's something I didn't tell you about primordials. Something even the pack doesn't know. He turned her in his arms so they were face to face. We can sense potential. In people. In situations. It's like an awareness of possibility. What does that have to do with... Sarah, normal humans can't survive a wolf bite. The change would kill them. Their bodies can't handle the magic. But there are exceptions. Rare ones. People who have latent potential for the shift buried in their bloodline. Her blood went cold. Are you saying I'm saying I don't think it was an accident that your parents drove through wolf territory. I think something was calling them here. Calling you here. His eyes searched hers. And I think the whispers you hear, they're your wolf trying to wake up. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Everything she'd believed about herself, about her identity, suddenly uncertain. That's impossible, she whispered. I'm human. I've always been human. You were human, Kale corrected gently. But trauma can trigger the change in those with the bloodline. The accident, the grief, living among wolves for 3 years. He cupped her face. The bond tomorrow night won't just connect us, Sarah. It might awaken what's already sleeping inside you. And if I shift? Her voice trembled. If I become like you? Then you'll be stronger, harder to hurt, harder to lose. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. But it also means the pain will be worse when it comes. The instincts more intense, the bond more consuming. Everything changes, Sarah breathed. Everything already changed. Kale kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. The moment you chose me, there was no going back. Outside, the moon rose, nearly full, heavy with promise and threat. Tomorrow night, they would bond. And Sarah would discover if she was brave enough to embrace the monster within. Chapter 7. Moonrise. The day of the bonding ceremony dawned cold and crystalline. Sarah woke wrapped in Kale's arms on the floor where they'd fallen asleep, her head pillowed on his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, slower than a human's, more powerful. She'd counted the rhythm through the night whenever nightmares threatened, letting it anchor her to reality. Now, in the pale morning light, she studied his face. In sleep, the harsh lines softened. He looked younger, almost peaceful. But even unconscious, tension lingered in his jaw, his shoulders, as if his body never fully let down its guard. I can feel you staring, he murmured without opening his eyes. A slight smile curved his lips. It's distracting. Good. Sarah traced a finger along his collarbone, fascinated by the way his muscles shifted beneath her touch. You've been in my head since we met. Fair's fair. His eyes opened, that startling silver fixing on her with an intensity that made her stomach flip. I'm always in your head now. The bond's getting stronger. Can you feel it? She could. It was like a golden thread connecting them, invisible but tangible. When she concentrated, she could sense his emotions, the desire he was carefully controlling, the anxiety about tonight, and underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that took her breath away. I feel you, she whispered. It's strange. Good strange, but strange. It'll get stronger after tonight. His hand came up to cup her cheek. By tomorrow, we won't be able to hide anything from each other. Every emotion, every fear, A sharp knock interrupted him. They both tensed. Kyle was on his feet in one fluid movement, positioning himself between Sarah and the door. The primordial in him rose to the surface. She could see it in the way his eyes brightened, the predatory stillness of his stance. Who is it? His voice carried a subtle growl. Elder Thorn. The old wolf's voice was calm, unbothered by the threat in Kale's tone. I've come to prepare the female for the ceremony. Tradition requires it. Kale's jaw clenched, but he opened the door. The ancient wolf stood on the threshold, his weathered face unreadable. Behind him, 2 younger females carried baskets. Omegas, Sarah realized, their eyes downcast. The ceremony begins at moonrise, Thorn said. She must be cleansed and prepared. You know the rituals. I know them. Kale's reluctance was palpable. He turned to Sarah. conflict written across his features. You don't have to do this. We could leave right now. Run before… No. Sarah stood, moving to his side. We're not running. We're not giving them the satisfaction. Something proud flickered in Kyle's expression. Stubborn woman. You chose me, she reminded him with a small smile. No. His hand caught hers, squeezing gently. You chose me. I'm just grateful you did. Elder Thorn cleared his throat pointedly. The moon waits for no one. Come, child. Sarah followed the elder and his attendants, glancing back to see Cale watching from the doorway. The golden thread between them pulled taut as distance grew, and she felt his anxiety spike, primal instinct hating every step that took her away. I'll be fine, she thought, projecting the emotion down that invisible connection. She felt his response, a pulse of warmth, of trust, though the worry didn't entirely fade. The Omegas led her to a ceremonial bathhouse she'd never known existed, hidden deep in the forest. Steam rose from natural hot springs, and the air smelled of sage and cedar. They undressed her with gentle, efficient hands, and she tried not to feel self-conscious about her human fragility compared to their supernatural grace. Into the water, one of them instructed softly. The springs will cleanse you of your old life. Sarah stepped into the heated pool, gasping as the water enveloped her. It was almost too hot, making her skin flush pink. The Omegas followed, producing soaps that smelled of moonflower and wild herbs. You're brave, one of them whispered as she worked the soap through Sarah's hair. Choosing him. Most females wouldn't dare. Why not? Sarah asked. Because he's a primordial? Because he's that primordial. The Omega exchanged glances with her companion. The prophecies speak of one who would rise, ancient power in modern form, one who could unite the packs or destroy them all. Sarah's heart skipped. What prophecies? But Elder Thorn's voice cut through before they could answer. Enough gossip. Focus on your duties. The Omegas fell silent, though Sarah caught their meaningful looks. She filed the information away, determined to ask Cale about prophecies once this was over. They dressed her in a ceremonial gown, white silk that clung to her curves before flowing to the ground. It was beautiful and impractical, clearly designed for ritual rather than comfort. They braided her hair with silver thread and marked her skin with ancient symbols in ash. What do these mean? Sarah asked, studying the marks on her arms. Protection, Thorn said, his eyes distant. Though whether they'll be enough against what you're bonding with… He trailed off, shaking his head. You should know, child. What you do tonight isn't just about joining with Cale. The primordial inside him recognizes something in you, something that calls to it. He told me about the potential for shifting. Did he tell you about the pain? Thorn's gaze was sharp. If your wolf awakens during the bonding, it won't be gentle. It'll feel like dying and being reborn. Some don't survive the transformation. Their human hearts give out from the strain. Sarah's mouth went dry. Why are you telling me this now? Because you still have a choice. You can walk away. Find a human life somewhere far from here. The old wolf's expression softened slightly. I've lived 300 years. I've seen many things. But I've never seen an alpha, a true alpha. Look at someone the way Cale looks at you. If you die tonight, it will destroy him. The primordial will consume what's left. And if I survive? Thorn smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Then you'll be the most dangerous female this territory has ever known. A human turned wolf, bonded to a primordial. He paused. Alpha Garrick fears this outcome more than anything. That's why he's allowed the bonding to proceed. He's hoping you won't survive it. Rage, sharp and clarifying, cut through Sarah's fear. He wants me dead, He wants you both neutralized. If you die, Kale is finished. If you survive but the transformation goes wrong, you become a liability he can exploit. Thorn's ancient eyes held hers. There's only one way to win. Tonight. To embrace the change completely. To let go of your human fear and trust the wolf inside you. I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do. The elder's hand rested briefly on her shoulder. You've been doing it since the moment you defended Kale in front of the entire pack. Since you chose the outcast over safety. That's not human logic, child. That's wolf instinct. The words settled into Sarah's bones, feeling true in a way she couldn't explain. The sun was setting when they finally led her back through the forest. She could feel Kale before she saw him, that golden thread pulling tighter, vibrating with need and barely controlled tension. He waited at the edge of the ceremonial grounds, dressed in simple black. No adornment, no ceremony, just the raw power of what he was. When his eyes found her, they blazed silver white. The clearing was ringed with torches. Every wolf in the territory had gathered, forming a circle around the sacred space. Alpha Garrick stood at the northern point, his expression carefully neutral. But Sarah saw the calculation in his eyes, the anticipation of violence. He was waiting for her to fail, waiting for Kale to lose control. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Kale met her at the circle's edge, and the moment he took her hand, electricity arced between them. The golden thread flared brilliant and binding. Last chance, he whispered, but his grip was iron. He wouldn't let her go, even if she tried. Say the word, and I'll get you out of here. Sarah looked up at him, this wounded warrior who'd chosen justice over power, who'd held her dying mother's hand, who'd shown her what it meant to be wanted instead of merely tolerated. I'm not going anywhere, she said clearly, loud enough for every wolf to hear. Tonight, I'm yours, and you're mine. The moon crested the horizon, full and heavy with ancient magic. The bonding ceremony had begun, and in the forest beyond the torchlight, something else stirred, drawn by the power gathering in the clearing, by the scent of a primordial claiming his mate. The rogues were coming, and they were hungry for blood. Chapter 8. The Bonding. The ceremony began with fire. Elder Thorn lit the central pyre, flames leaping toward the night sky as ancient words spilled from his lips. Words in a language Sarah didn't understand, but felt in her marrow. The gathered wolves began to hum, a low vibration that resonated through the ground beneath her feet. Kyle led her to the center of the circle, his hand steady despite the tremor she felt through their connection. He was terrified, she realized, not of the ceremony, but of hurting her. I trust you, she sent down the golden thread. His eyes found hers, blazing with emotion too complex to name. The bond requires blood, Thorn announced, producing a ceremonial blade. The male must mark the female, claiming her as his own. The female must mark the male in return, accepting the bond willingly. He handed the blade to Kale, whose hand closed around the hilt with visible reluctance. I don't want to hurt you, Kale whispered, so only she could hear. You won't. Sarah tilted her head, exposing her throat in the ultimate gesture of trust. Around them, several wolves gasped. The position was vulnerable, submissive, reserved for the deepest bonds. Kale's eyes flared. Sarah, you don't have to. I know. She held his gaze. I want to. His breathing turned ragged. The primordial was rising. She could see it in the way his pupils dilated, the way his muscles tensed with barely controlled power. When he raised the blade, his hand shook. I've got you, Sarah breathed. I'm not afraid. The blade touched her throat, a whisper of cold metal, and then the sharp bite of pain as he made the ceremonial cut. not deep, but enough to draw blood. The crimson trail ran down her neck, and around them, the wolves' humming intensified. Kale's eyes locked on the wound, silver bleeding into his irises until they glowed like molten moonlight. When he lowered his head to seal the mark with his mouth, Sarah felt the world tilt. Heat exploded through her veins. Magic, raw and ancient, poured into her from his lips, his tongue, the graze of his teeth. The golden thread between them blazed brilliant white, solidifying into something unbreakable. She gasped, her hands fisting in his shirt as sensation overwhelmed her. She could feel everything he felt, the desperate hunger, the fierce protectiveness, the soul-deep need to claim and possess and keep her safe. But beneath it all was something else, something vast and primal that regarded her with ancient eyes. The primordial. It knew her, recognized her. Mine, it whispered in her mind. Finally, mine. Kale pulled back, his lips stained with her blood, his expression wild. Your turn, he rasped. Mark me. Make the bond complete. Thorn handed her the blade, and Sarah took it with shaking hands. She understood now why the ceremony required this, not just symbolism, but a true exchange of power, of essence. She pressed the blade to Kale's throat, feeling the rapid flutter of his pulse beneath the steel. When she cut, his blood was darker than hers, almost black in the firelight. The moment her lips touched his skin, the world exploded. Power slammed into her like a physical force. She felt Kale's wolf, felt the primordial coiled beneath his human skin, and they were glorious, terrifying and beautiful and more alive than anything she'd ever experienced. They opened to her completely, hiding nothing, and she understood with devastating clarity what he'd been protecting her from. The hunger wasn't just for violence, it was for connection, for belonging. The primordial had been alone for so long, caged and feared, that the chance to finally bond with someone who accepted it, who saw it, and didn't run, was almost unbearable. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she sealed the mark. When she pulled back, she was shaking violently. It's done, Thorn declared. The bond is sealed. They are... He never finished. The first rogue burst from the tree line with a snarl that shook the night. Then another, and another. Within seconds, a dozen feral wolves surrounded the clearing, their eyes wild, their forms twisted by years without humanity. Attack! Someone screamed. Chaos erupted. The pack wolves shifted, bones cracking and reforming as they took their animal forms. Garrick's command voice boomed through the clearing, trying to establish order, but the rogues were already among them. Kale shoved Sarah behind him, his body becoming a living shield. Stay close to me. Don't run. But Sarah barely heard him. Something was happening inside her. The power from the bond mixing with something that had been dormant, waiting. The whispers she'd heard for 3 years suddenly crystallized into clarity. Shift, they urged. Change. Become. Pain lanced through her spine. She cried out, falling to her knees as her bones began to crack and reform. No, too soon. She wasn't ready. Sarah! Kale's voice was anguished. He couldn't help her and fight the rogues at the same time. She felt his agony through the bond, the impossible choice tearing him apart. Go, she sent desperately. Protect the pack. I'll be okay. She hoped it was true. The transformation was agony. Every bone breaking and reshaping. Every muscle tearing and rebuilding. She screamed, the sound morphing into something between human and animal. Around her, the battle raged, snarls and howls and the wet sound of fangs meeting flesh. Through the haze of pain, she saw Kale shift. But he didn't become a normal wolf. His form expanded, grew massive, fur rippling silver white. The primordial emerged in all its terrifying glory, twice the size of any other wolf, radiating power that made the air shimmer. The rogues hesitated, instinct screaming at them to flee. But their hunger was greater than their fear. 3 of them lunged at once. Kyle, the primordial, met them with devastating efficiency. He moved like liquid death, each strike precise and brutal. Within seconds, 2 rogues lay still. The third limped away, whimpering. But more kept coming. The pack wolves were outnumbered, overwhelmed. Sarah saw an Omega go down, a rogue's jaws closing on her throat. Saw Elder Thorn fighting side by side with wolves 1/10 of his age, his ancient body moving with surprising grace. And she saw Alpha Garrick standing at the edge of the battle, watching. Not fighting, just watching with cold calculation. He'd known. He'd known the rogues would attack during the ceremony. Had probably planned it. Rage gave Sarah strength through the pain. Her transformation accelerated, bones snapping into their new configuration. Fur erupted across her skin, not brown or gray like common wolves, but pure white that seemed to glow in the firelight. When she finally completed the shift, she stood on 4 legs, panting. The world looked different, sharper, more vivid. Sense exploded across her awareness, blood and fear and the acrid stench of the rogues. And underneath it all, Kale's scent, pine and smoke and something uniquely him that called to every instinct she now possessed. A rogue spotted her, seeing easy prey in the newly turned wolf. It charged, fangs bared. Sarah didn't think. She moved on pure instinct, meeting the attack head-on. They collided in a tangle of fur and fury. The rogue was larger, more experienced, but Sarah had something it didn't. She had rage. 3 years of suppressed anger at being kept prisoner, at having her parents' murder covered up, at being treated like a possession instead of a person. She had power. The bond with Kale thrummed through her, feeding her strength. And she had purpose. These rogues were threatening her pack. Her mate. Her jaws found the rogue's throat and clamped down. The taste of blood was copper and wrong, but she didn't let go until the wolf stopped struggling. When she released it, she raised her head and howled, a sound of challenge and claim that rang through the clearing. Every wolf stopped fighting, turned to stare. The white wolf stood over her kill, blood staining her pristine fur, her eyes blazing the same silver white as Kale's. Impossible, someone breathed, because white wolves were legend, the rarest of the rare, and they always carried primordial blood. Sarah wasn't just a wolf. She was something ancient awakened, something that matched Kale in power, in potential. The prophecy Elder Thorn had mentioned suddenly made terrible sense. One who would rise, they'd said, but they'd gotten it wrong. It wasn't one primordial that would change everything. It was 2. Across the clearing, Kale's massive form went absolutely still. Their eyes met, and through the bond, she felt his shock, his awe, his absolute, unwavering devotion. My mate, the primordial purred in her mind. My equal. My everything. The remaining rogues, sensing the shift in power, turned and fled into the forest. The pack wolves stood frozen, unsure whether to celebrate or fear. And Alpha Garrick's expression transformed from calculation to pure, undiluted terror, because he'd just lost control of everything. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. The silence after battle was deafening. Sarah stood in her wolf form, still processing the impossible reality of what she'd become. Her white fur gleamed in the firelight, unmarred except for the blood of her kill. Around her, the pack wolves remained frozen, caught between awe and instinctive submission. She could feel their deference like a physical pressure. These wolves who had dismissed her, pitied her, treated her as less than. Now they couldn't even meet her eyes. Kyle padded toward her, his massive primordial form moving with predatory grace. When he reached her, He lowered his head, pressing his muzzle against hers in a gesture of pure tenderness that contrasted sharply with his fearsome appearance. "You're magnificent," his voice echoed in her mind, clear and intimate through their completed bond. "I knew you were strong, but this... Sarah, you're perfect." The love in his mental voice made her chest ache. She pressed closer, drawing comfort from his solid presence. The bond between them was incandescent now, a living thing that pulsed with shared emotion and power. "I was so afraid," she confessed. "The pain. I know, I felt it all." Anguish colored his thoughts. "Every moment of your transformation, I felt your agony and couldn't help you. It nearly destroyed me. But you protected the pack. You did what you had to do. The pack can burn. You're all that matters." The fierce possessiveness should have alarmed her. Instead, it felt right. True. She'd become something wilder than human, something that understood the depth of wolf devotion. "Shift back." Alpha Garrick's voice cut through their communion, sharp with barely controlled panic. "Both of you. Now." Kale's growl rumbled through the clearing, a sound of pure threat. Several wolves whimpered and backed away. "That wasn't a request," Garrick snapped, but Sarah heard the tremor beneath his bravado. "I'm still alpha of this pack, and I demand..." Kale's shift happened in a heartbeat. One moment, he was the massive primordial wolf. The next, he stood in human form, naked and utterly unbothered by it. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. "You demand nothing," Kyle said, his voice laced with ancient authority. "Not anymore." Sarah shifted too, grateful when one of the Omegas quickly brought her a robe. The transformation back was easier than the first shift, her body already learning the new rhythms. When she stood on human legs again, she felt the change in how others looked at her. No longer prey, no longer weak, feared. "What is she?" Elder Thorne's voice held wonder and wariness. He approached slowly, his ancient eyes studying Sarah with new intensity. "White wolves are myth, stories told to cubs. Yet here, she stands. She's primordial," Kale said, moving to Sarah's side. His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. "Born dormant, awakened by trauma, and completed by our bond." "Two primordials," Garrick said, and the words sounded like a death sentence. "This is a disaster. The Council will never allow..." "The Council has no authority over primordials," Thorne interrupted. His expression was thoughtful, calculating. "The old laws are clear. Primordials answer to no pack, no alpha. They are sovereign unto themselves." "That's insanity," Garrick snarled. "We can't have two rogue wolves with that kind of power running loose." "We're not rogue." Sarah's voice rang clear across the clearing. She was surprised by her own calm, by the certainty in her words. "We're pack. This pack, whether you like it or not." "You have no claim here," Garrick spat. "You're human. We're human. You have no lineage, no right." "She has every right." Kale's eyes blazed. "By bonding with me, she shares my claim. My birthright." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The alpha claim I rejected 3 years ago. The one that still legally exists." The clearing erupted in whispers. Sarah felt Kale's resolve through the bond. He'd avoided this confrontation for years, but something had shifted. She had shifted everything. "You refused the title," Garrick said, but his voice had gone hollow. "You rejected it before witnesses." "I refused to challenge you for leadership," Kale corrected. "I never formally relinquished my claim. There's a difference." He stepped forward, and wolves instinctively moved out of his path. "By law, I am still the rightful alpha of the Silver Moon Pack. And now, so is she." "No." Garrick's face purpled with rage. I won't allow it. I'll challenge you. You'll lose. Thorn's flat statement stopped him cold. Garrick, you can barely match a strong beta. Against one primordial, you'd have no chance. Against two? The old wolf shook his head. It would be suicide. Then I'll call for a pack vote. The wolves will choose. Will they? Sarah found herself speaking, surprising even herself. But the words felt right. Powered by instinct she was only beginning to understand. You let rogues attack during our bonding ceremony. You stood aside while pack members fought and died. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several wolves turned accusing eyes toward their alpha. That's a lie, Garrick blustered, but his scent betrayed him. Fear and guilt rolled off him in waves. I saw you, Sarah continued, her voice steady. Standing at the edge of the battle, watching, waiting. She addressed the pack now, not Garrick. He hoped we would die tonight, hoped the rogues would solve his problem. You can't prove that, Garrick said desperately. I don't have to. Kale's voice was cold. Your scent tells the story. Every wolf here can smell your guilt. Muttering spread through the crowd. Sarah caught fragments. Smelled wrong. Knew something was off. My sister nearly died while he watched. You orchestrated this, Elder Thorn said slowly, his ancient face hardening. You knew the rogues were in the territory. Knew they'd be drawn by the ceremonial magic. His voice dropped to something dangerous. How long have you been working with them, Garrick? I haven't. This is ridiculous. The attack was too coordinated, Thorn continued, speaking to the pack. Too perfectly timed. Rogues don't work together like that unless someone is controlling them. Someone with authority. Or someone with leverage, Sarah added, pieces clicking into place. What did you promise them? Access to pack territory? Our weakest members as prey? Garrick's silence was damning. Alpha Garrick. Thorn's voice carried the weight of 3 centuries. As eldest of this pack, I invoke the right of inquiry. You will submit to questioning, or you will be declared outlaw. You can't do this, Garrick said, but his protest was weak. I'm Alpha. I have rights. Rights you forfeited through betrayal. Thorn's eyes were hard. Kyle. Sarah. The pack requires leadership, true leadership. Will you accept the burden? Sarah felt Kale's hesitation through the bond. He'd run from this responsibility for 3 years, terrified of what he might become. But she also felt his protectiveness, his bone-deep need to keep her safe. And under Garrick's rule, she would never be safe. We do this together, she sent to him. You're not alone anymore. You'll never be alone again. His hand tightened on hers. When he spoke, his voice was firm. We accept, but on our terms. This pack will change. No more punishing those who seek justice. No more treating members as disposable. And humans who seek sanctuary will be given honest choice, not manipulation. Agreed, Thorn said immediately. Several other wolves echoed the sentiment. This is a coup, Garrick snarled. Treason. This is evolution, Thorn cut him off. The world is changing. The old ways of rule through fear and dominance are ending. Kale and Sarah represent something new. Power tempered by compassion. Strength balanced by wisdom. He turned to address the pack. Those who wish to follow the old Alpha may leave with him when he's exiled. Those who wish to stay will pledge to the new leadership. Sarah watched as one by one, wolves stepped forward. First the Omegas, those who'd been treated as lowest, who had the most to gain from change. Then younger wolves, their eyes bright with hope. Then seasoned warriors, some bearing wounds from tonight's battle. Even some of Garrick's own supporters crossed over, unable to defend betrayal. Within minutes, only a handful remained with Garrick. He looked around at the desertion, his expression crumbling. "You'll regret this," he said, voice breaking. "All of you. Primordials are dangerous, unstable. They'll destroy everything we've built." "You destroyed it yourself," Kyle said quietly. "When you chose revenge over justice, pride over pack." He gestured toward the forest. "Go. Take those who wish to follow you and leave. You have until dawn." Garrick's mouth opened, closed. For a moment, Sarah almost felt pity for him. A father who'd never processed his grief, who'd let it poison him into something monstrous. But then she remembered her mother's blood, remembered 3 years of lies. The pity died. Garrick shifted without another word, his wolf form gray and diminished. His few remaining supporters followed, their shapes disappearing into the darkness. Silence fell over the clearing once more. Then Elder Thorn dropped to one knee, his head bowed. "Alpha, Luna, we pledge our loyalty." The pack followed suit, a wave of submission that Sarah felt in her bones. The weight of their trust, their hope, settled over her like a mantle. She looked at Kyle, saw the same mixture of determination and fear in his eyes. "We can do this," she sent. "Together." Together, he agreed. And as the moon climbed higher, the Silver Moon Pack, newly forged in blood and truth, began to heal. Chapter 10. The morning after dawn broke soft and golden over the forest, painting the world in shades of amber and rose. Sarah stood on the porch of what had been the exile cabin, what was now simply home, watching the sunrise with Kale's arms wrapped around her from behind. They'd spent the night in the pack house, receiving pledges and dealing with the immediate aftermath of the power shift, but had slipped away before dawn. They needed this. Quiet. Peace. A moment to process the impossible transformation their lives had taken. "How does it feel?" Kale murmured against her hair. "Being Luna of a pack that feared you yesterday?" "Terrifying," Sarah admitted. She leaned back into his warmth, marveling at how natural it felt. "I don't know how to lead wolves. I barely know how to be one." "You'll learn. We'll learn together." His arms tightened. "Though I should warn you, pack politics make last night's battle look simple." Sarah laughed, the sound surprising them both. When was the last time she'd laughed, really laughed, without fear or restraint? "What?" Kyle asked, turning her to face him. His silver eyes were soft in the morning light, the harsh edges gentled by contentment. "I just realized," Sarah said, reaching up to touch his face. "I'm happy. For the first time in 3 years, I'm actually happy." Something melted in Kale's expression. "So am I," he whispered, as if the admission was dangerous. "I didn't think I could be. After Lyra, after Marcus, after everything, I thought happiness was something that happened to other people. And now? Now I have you." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "My impossible, stubborn, magnificent mate who looked at a monster and chose him anyway." "You're not a monster," Sarah said firmly. "You're just more powerful, more complex, more than anyone expected." She smiled. "Turns out I'm more too. A white wolf." Kyle's expression held awe and lingering disbelief. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? In all of wolf history, there have been maybe a dozen. They're called moonborn. Wolves touched directly by lunar magic. Is that different from being primordial?" "It's a type of primordial, the rarest type." He guided her to sit on the porch steps, settling beside her. "Most primordials are born from bloodlines, ancient families that carry the old magic. But moonborn are created, not inherited. They emerge when someone with latent potential undergoes extreme trauma under the full moon." Sarah processed this. My parents' deaths. The accident happened during a full moon, didn't it? Kyle nodded. The magic marked you that night, planted the seed. Then 3 years of living among wolves, of grief and suppressed rage, fed that seed. When we bonded during the ceremony, he shook his head. The perfect storm of circumstances. The moon itself chose you. For what purpose? That's the question, isn't it? Kale stared out at the forest, his expression thoughtful. The prophecies Elder Thorn mentioned. I've heard them too. They speak of 2 primordials who would rise together. One born, one made. One dark, one light. His eyes found hers. Together they would either unite all packs under one rule or shatter the old order completely. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. That's a lot of pressure for a girl who was human yesterday. You were never just human, Kale said gently. Even before you shifted, you challenged an alpha to his face. Chose an outcast when it would have been easier to pick someone else. You've always had the heart of a wolf, Sarah. The transformation just made it visible. Before Sarah could respond, a familiar presence approached. Elder Thorn emerged from the tree line, his weathered face composed but urgent. Alpha, Luna. He inclined his head respectfully. Forgive the intrusion, but we have complications. Kyle tensed. What kind of complications? Word of last night's events has spread to the neighboring territories. Thorn climbed the steps slowly, his ancient bones protesting. The Nightshade Pack to the north, the Crimson River Pack to the south. They're both demanding audiences. Already? Sarah's stomach dropped. It's barely been 12 hours. The supernatural world moves quickly when power shifts, Thorn explained. 2 primordials taking control of a pack. That's not something that can be ignored. Every alpha within 100 miles is nervous. Let them be nervous, Kale said, but Sarah felt his anxiety through the bond. There's more. Thorn's expression grew grave. Garrick didn't leave the territory last night. He's holed up in the eastern caves with his supporters. They're making noise about a counter-challenge. On what grounds? Sarah demanded. He betrayed the pack. That's cause for exile, not reconsideration. He's claiming we manipulated events, that Kyle orchestrated the rogue attack to make him look guilty. Thorn spread his hands helplessly. It's weak, but he's desperate. And some of the older wolves, the ones loyal to tradition above all else, are listening. Kale stood abruptly, pacing the porch like a caged animal. He won't let this go. Not until one of us is dead. Or until he's proven guilty beyond doubt, Sarah said, an idea forming. The rogues, some survived the attack. They fled into the forest. You want to hunt them down? Kale asked. I want to question them. Sarah stood, moving to his side. If Garrick was working with them, they'll know. We get proof. We end this cleanly. Rogues don't talk, Thorn said doubtfully. They're too far gone, too feral. Normal rogues, maybe. Sarah felt her wolf stir beneath her skin, responding to her determination. But I'm betting Garrick kept some of them sane enough to follow orders. Those ones we can reach. Kyle studied her, and she felt his assessment through the bond. You're thinking like an alpha already. I'm thinking like someone who's tired of playing defense. Sarah turned to Thorn. Can you hold the pack together for a few hours? Keep the neighboring alphas at bay? I can try, but if Garrick makes his move while you're gone, he won't. Kale's confidence was absolute. He's a coward at heart. He'll wait, gather support, try to build a case. That gives us time. Then we hunt at midday, Sarah decided. The forest will be easier to navigate in daylight, and we'll still have time to deal with whatever we find before nightfall. Thorn bowed. As you command, Luna. After he left, Sarah felt the weight of the title settle more heavily on her shoulders. Luna, leader, protector of a pack that had been her prison just days ago. Having second thoughts? Kale asked softly. 1,000 of them. Sarah leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. But I'm not backing down. These wolves deserve better than Garrick. Better than fear and lies. They deserve you. Kyle tilted her chin up, his expression fierce with pride. You're going to be an incredible Luna, even if you don't believe it yet. I believe in us, Sarah said. That's enough for now. They stood together as the sun climbed higher, two primordials at the edge of something vast and unknown. The pack stirred in the distance, their pack now, their responsibility. Kyle? Sarah said quietly. The prophecy mentioned we'd either unite the packs or shatter the old order. Which one do you think we'll do? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. But whatever comes, whatever we become, we face it together. Together, Sarah echoed. Somewhere in the forest, rogues hid and schemed. In the caves, a deposed alpha plotted revenge. Beyond the territory borders, other packs watched and waited to see if these new leaders would be allies or threats. But in that moment, none of it mattered. There was only Kale and Sarah, bonded by fate and choice, standing at the beginning of a story that would change the wolf world forever. The hunt would begin at midday. For now, they had each other. And sometimes, that was enough. In the shadows of the eastern caves, Garrick paced and planned. In the northern territories, the Nightshade Alpha sharpened his claws. In the south, the Crimson River Luna smiled and set her own schemes in motion. The game had only just begun, and the Moonborn and her primordial mate would soon learn that taking power was the easy part. Keeping it would cost them everything,